There is something hidden inside the walls of the oldest Jewish homes in the world, something that no inspector would find, no renovation crew would recognize, no real estate listing would ever mention, that has been quietly, invisibly protecting the families who live within those walls for generations, not for years, not for decades, generations. Grandmothers who placed it there have long since passed, and yet the protection continues. Their great-grandchildren sleep safely in rooms whose walls carry a secret those children will never see with their eyes, but will feel in their bones every single day of their lives without ever knowing why. The secret is a Torah code, specific Hebrew words written on small pieces of parchment or paper and sealed inside the walls during construction or renovation, hidden between plaster and stone, between drywall and paint, invisible to everyone except the woman who placed them there and the God whose words they carry. This practice, maintained by Jewish families across the Sephardic and Mizrachi world for centuries, represents one of the most intimate and most powerful forms of household protection ever devised. And tonight I am going to share it with you. The specific words, the specific placement, the specific method. Because the homes that carry this code within their walls experience a quality of multi-generational blessing that homes without it simply do not. Before I reveal the words themselves, you need to understand something about walls that the modern world has completely forgotten. In the Kabbalistic tradition, the walls of a home are not merely structural barriers that hold up a roof and separate interior from exterior. Walls are vessels. They are spiritual containers that absorb, store, and radiate whatever energy is placed within them and around them over time. The Zohar teaches that the walls of a home listen, not metaphorically. The stone, the wood, the plaster, the paint. These materials absorb the vibrations of every word spoken within the rooms they enclose. Arguments penetrate the walls and remain there as residue. Prayers penetrate the walls and remain there as blessing. Laughter soaks into them. Weeping soaks into them. My grandmother gave me these secrets in her home 50 years ago. Every blessing, every protection, every tradition that makes a Jewish home truly sacred. Now I've gathered them all into one book just for you. Visit the link in the description or pinned comment and let me be your grandmother too. Over years and decades, the walls of a home become saturated with the accumulated spiritual history of the family that lives within them. This is why some old homes feel warm and welcoming the moment you enter, even when they are physically modest. The walls have absorbed generations of love. And this is why some homes feel cold and hostile despite expensive renovation. The walls carry the residue of conflict and pain that no coat of paint can cover. The grandmothers who understood this principle realized something extraordinary. If walls absorb whatever is placed within them and around them, then the most powerful thing you could do for your home's spiritual protection would be to place sacred words directly inside the walls themselves, not on the walls where they could be seen, removed, painted over, or damaged, inside them, embedded in the very structure of the dwelling, woven into the physical fabric of the building, where they would radiate their protective energy outward into every room continuously, invisibly, permanently, for as long as the walls stood. This is not a folk practice invented by superstitious women. It has deep roots in the Torah itself. The book of Deuteronomy, chapter 6, verse 9, commands, and you shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. This verse, which is the basis for the mezuzah, the sacred scroll placed on the doorpost, establishes the principle that sacred words placed on the physical structure of the home create a continuous field of divine protection. The mezuzah is the most visible expression of this principle, but the Kabbalists extended the principle beyond the doorpost. If sacred words on the doorpost protect the entrance, they reasoned, then sacred words within the walls protect the entire structure. The doorpost guards the threshold. The walls guard everything within. The specific words that the grandmothers inscribed inside their walls were drawn from several sources, and the selection varied somewhat across communities. But the most universally used text, the one that appeared with striking consistency from Morocco to Yemen, from Tunisia to Iraq, was a set of 3 verses, each addressing a different dimension of household protection, together forming a complete shield that covered the family's physical safety, spiritual purity, and material prosperity. The first verse is from Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 6. Baruch atah bavoecha, uvarach atah b'tzatecha. Blessed shall you be when you come in, and blessed shall you be when you go out. This verse addresses the physical movement of the family, every departure and every return, every time a family member leaves the protection of the home, and every time they come back. By placing this verse inside the walls, the grandmother was inscribing a permanent blessing over the family's comings and goings, ensuring that the protection of the home extended beyond its physical boundaries and accompanied each family member wherever they went. The walls carrying this verse became not merely a barrier that protected the family when they were inside, but a source of blessing that radiated outward, covering the family even when they were outside. The second verse is from Psalms chapter 91, verse 10. Lo tunei ailesha ra'ah, v'nega lo yikrav bo halesha. No evil shall befall you, nor shall any plague come near your dwelling. This verse addresses the spiritual and physical integrity of the home itself. It is a direct divine promise that the dwelling, the ohel, the tent, the physical structure, will be shielded from harm. My grandmother gave me these secrets in her home 50 years ago. Every blessing, every protection, every tradition that makes a Jewish home truly sacred. Now I've gathered them all into one book just for you. Visit the link in the description or pinned comment and let me be your grandmother too. By placing this verse inside the walls, the grandmother was activating this promise within the very fabric of the building, turning the walls themselves into carriers of divine protection against illness, misfortune, and every form of evil that might attempt to penetrate the household. The third verse is from Proverbs chapter 3, verse 10. V'yimalu asamecha sava, v'tairosh yakavecha yifrotsu. Your barns will be filled with plenty, and your vats will overflow with new wine. This verse addresses material prosperity, the abundance that sustains the family across generations. By placing this verse inside the walls, alongside the verses of protection and blessing, the grandmother was ensuring that the home was not merely safe, but prosperous, not merely shielded from harm, but actively attracting the flow of parnassah that would sustain the family for as long as the structure endured. Together, these 3 verses created what the Kabbalists would recognize as a complete tikkun for the home, a repair and fortification that addressed every dimension of domestic well-being: physical safety in the comings and goings, spiritual protection against evil and disease, material abundance that fills and overflows. A home whose walls carried all 3 verses was considered, in the tradition, to be as close to a mikdash me'at, a miniature temple, as any domestic structure could be. There was a family in the ancient Jewish community of Jerba, Tunisia, an island that preserved some of the oldest and most pristine Jewish customs in the world, whose home had been in the family for over 200 years. The house itself was modest by any standard: whitewashed stone walls, a small courtyard, a kitchen that could barely fit 4 people standing. But the family that lived there experienced a quality of multi-generational stability that was remarkable even by the standards of Jerba's close-knit Jewish community. Across 7 generations, the family produced scholars, merchants, and craftsmen who were respected throughout the island. No member of the family died young. No generation experienced the devastating poverty that struck other families during economic downturns. No serious illness took hold within the household for periods longer than a few days. The neighbors attributed this to the family's piety, which was certainly part of the explanation. But the family's matriarch, the oldest living woman in the household, who at the time this story was recorded was 91 years old, attributed it to something else entirely. She said, "My grandmother's grandmother put the words in the walls when this house was built. The words have been working ever since. We just live here. The walls do the rest." When pressed for details, the matriarch explained that according to family tradition, the original builder of the home, a woman whose name had been lost to time but whose act had not, had written the 3 verses on small pieces of parchment and sealed them inside the walls during construction. One parchment was placed in the eastern wall of the main room. One was placed in the wall of the kitchen near where the stove would stand, and one was placed in the wall of the bedroom where the head of the family slept. The placement was deliberate, the eastern wall to catch the first spiritual energy of each new day, the kitchen wall to bless the preparation and consumption of food, and the bedroom wall to protect the family during the vulnerable hours of sleep. The matriarch said something else that has stayed with me since I first heard this story. She said, "The words do not get old. Paper gets old. Ink gets old. But the words are alive. They are as strong today as the day they were written because the words come from the Torah, and the Torah does not age." That teaching that sacred words once placed do not lose their power over time is central to the entire practice. Unlike other protective measures that must be renewed weekly or monthly or annually, the words inside the walls are understood to be permanent. Their spiritual charge does not diminish because the source of their power is not the physical ink on the physical paper. It is the divine energy encoded in the Hebrew letters themselves. Energy that, as the Sefer Yetzirah teaches, is as active and creative today as it was at the moment of creation. A verse from the Torah written on parchment and sealed inside a wall 200 years ago is, in the Kabbalistic understanding, radiating the same protective energy today as it did the day it was placed. The wall has not diminished it. If anything, the wall has amplified it because the verse has been absorbing the prayers, the blessings, and the sacred activities of the household for generations, growing stronger with each year of faithful family life conducted within its radius. Now let me give you the complete practice adapted for the modern home so that you can implement it regardless of whether you are building a new home, renovating an existing one, or living in a space whose walls are already sealed, and cannot be opened. For new construction or renovation, the ideal scenario and the practice is as follows. Obtain 3 small pieces of clean white paper or parchment. Parchment is traditional and preferred, but clean white paper is fully acceptable. Using black ink and a pen, not a pencil, not a marker with colored ink. Write each of the 3 verses on a separate piece of paper. Write them in Hebrew if you can. If you cannot write Hebrew, you may print the verses from a computer in Hebrew script. Though handwritten text is considered more spiritually potent because it carries the direct energy of the writer's intention through the physical act of forming each letter. Before writing, wash your hands 3 times, alternating right and left, as prescribed before any act of sacred writing. As you write each verse, hold in your mind the specific intention it carries. For the first verse, blessed when you come in, blessed when you go out. Hold the image of your family members leaving and returning safely each day. For the second verse, null for you, no evil shall befall you. Hold the image of your home surrounded by an impenetrable shield of divine protection. For the third verse, your barns filled with plenty. Hold the image of your kitchen table overflowing, your pantry full, your household sustained by abundance that never runs dry. After writing all 3 verses, hold the papers together between your palms and speak a declaration of intention. These words are placed in this home as a permanent covenant of protection, blessing, and abundance for my family and for every generation that lives within these walls. May they radiate the power of the Torah into every room, every corner, every moment of life lived within this dwelling, from this day forward and forever. Then seal each paper in a small protective covering, a plastic sleeve, a sealed envelope, a small Ziploc bag, to protect the paper from moisture and deterioration within the wall. The covering does not interfere with the spiritual function of the verses. It simply preserves the physical medium so that the words remain intact for as long as possible. Place the first verse, the blessing of comings and goings, inside the wall nearest to the front entrance of the home. If walls are open during construction or renovation, slip the covered paper between the studs or within the wall cavity before the wall is sealed. Place it at approximately the height of the mezuzah on the doorpost, roughly the upper third of the door frame, maintaining consistency with the broader system of sacred placement at the entrance. Place the second verse, the protection against evil, inside the wall of the kitchen, as close to the cooking area as possible. The kitchen is the heart of the home, the altar where sustenance is prepared, and the room most in need of continuous spiritual protection. Place the third verse, the promise of abundance, inside the wall of the master bedroom, near the head of the bed. This placement ensures that the verse's energy radiates over the sleeping family during the hours when the soul is most receptive, embedding the promise of prosperity into the spiritual structure of the family's rest. For existing homes where the walls cannot be opened, which is the situation most people will face, the tradition provides an alternative that the grandmothers considered nearly as effective as placement within the walls. Write the 3 verses on the same small papers, seal them in protective coverings, and place them behind objects that rest against the walls in the 3 designated locations. Behind a picture frame near the front entrance, behind a cabinet or shelf in the kitchen, behind the headboard of the bed in the master bedroom. The papers should be completely hidden from view, not visible to anyone, not accessible without moving the furniture or artwork that conceals them. The concealment is important. These words are doing their work in secret, and their power is partially derived from their hidden nature. The same principle that applies to the shin behind the front door and to other concealed protective practices I have shared in previous teachings. This alternative placement, while not identical to embedding the words within the wall itself, achieves the primary spiritual function of the practice. It places sacred words in permanent, hidden, continuous contact with the physical structure of the home in the three most important locations. The words radiate their protective and prosperous energy into the rooms where the family lives, sleeps, and eats, just as they would if they were sealed inside the walls. The difference is one of degree rather than kind. Inside the wall is more deeply embedded. Behind furniture against the wall is slightly less so. But both are effective, and both have been practiced by families who could not open their walls. There is one additional element that some communities added to the practice, and I want to share it because it addresses the multi-generational dimension of the protection. In certain families, particularly those with a strong awareness of generational spiritual inheritance, the grandmother who placed the words would also write a short personal declaration, not a Torah verse, but her own words, expressing her intention for the protection to extend to future generations. Something like, "May these words protect not only those who live here now, but every soul who will ever call this home their dwelling. May the children of my children's children sleep safely within these walls, blessed by the covenant I established today." This personal declaration, placed alongside the 3 Torah verses, added a human dimension to the divine words, a grandmother's love encoded into the very structure of the house, reaching forward through time to embrace descendants she would never meet. A family in the Jewish community of Fez, Morocco, discovered during a renovation of their ancestral home in the 1970s a small piece of parchment sealed inside the eastern wall of the main room. The parchment was yellowed and fragile, but still legible. It contained the 3 verses I have described tonight, written in a careful Sephardic hand, and beneath them, in smaller letters, a personal note from the woman who had placed it there. The note read, "I, Mazal Bat Shlomo, place these words in this wall on the 15th day of Elul, in the year 5612, which corresponds to approximately 1852, for the protection of my husband Yosef, my children, and all who will live in this house after us. May God guard this home as I have guarded my family." The family, reading this note more than 120 years after it was written, wept. They had lived in this house for 5 generations. They had survived plagues, famines, political upheavals, and the near destruction of the Moroccan Jewish community. And all along, hidden inside their wall, a woman named Mazal had been watching over them with 3 verses and a prayer. That is the power of this practice. It transcends the lifetime of the person who performs it. It outlasts the grandmother's hands, the grandmother's voice, the grandmother's physical presence. The words remain. The protection remains. The blessing remains. Long after the woman who wrote them has returned to the Creator who inspired them, her act of love continues to radiate from within the walls, touching the lives of people she never knew but loved in advance, with a love so fierce that she encoded it into the very structure of the building that would shelter them. Begin this practice in your own home. You do not need to wait for a renovation. You do not need to hire a contractor. Tonight you can write the 3 verses, seal them in protective coverings, and place them behind the picture frame near your entrance, behind the cabinet in your kitchen, and behind the headboard in your bedroom. In 15 minutes, you will have done something that will protect your family, not just for this week, or this month, or this year, but for as long as those walls stand and those words endure. And if you wish to add your own personal declaration, your own words of love and intention for the generations that will follow you, write them beneath the verses in your own hand, in your own language, from the deepest place in your heart. You are not merely performing a spiritual practice. You are leaving a message for the future. You are reaching forward through time and placing your hand on the head of a grandchild who does not yet exist, blessing them with protection they will never see, but will always feel. You are becoming the grandmother whose parchment is found 100 years from now, whose words make a stranger weep with the recognition that they were loved before they were born. May the words you place in your walls radiate protection through every generation that follows you. May the Torah verses you inscribe become permanent guardians of your home, as tireless and as faithful as the day they were written. May your walls listen and remember and bless, and may every soul who ever sleeps within them know the peace that comes from living in a home where love has been embedded in the very structure of the building. Share this with someone who is building a new home or renovating an old one, someone who has a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to place these words inside their walls before the plaster seals them in forever. Subscribe to this channel because every teaching we share is another word written, another wall blessed, another home fortified by the ancient wisdom that has been protecting Jewish families since the first grandmother picked up a pen and decided that her love would outlast her lifetime. May abundance, protection, and divine favor follow you in everything you do. Amen.